Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wholesale Change, the webcast and podcast from Distribution Strategy Group, where we offer thought leadership for wholesale change agents like you. My name's Ian Heller. I'll be your co-host today, along with the legendary luminary of logistics, the doctor of distribution, Jonathan Bine, PhD. Jonathan, how are you this morning, my friend?
I am great. And you know why I'm great?
Why are you great?
Da, 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 da. They say it's your birthday because my co-host is having a birthday today. And it ends with a 9, which means he'll be able to drink legally in all states in 2 years.
Well, I'm proud of the fact that I've accomplished this birthday. I've worked hard at it and planned it for a long time. And
it was a team effort. It was a team effort, wasn't it?
Between my mom, my dad, and Penny, my lovely wife, helping me to survive until now. You helping me thrive until now. And so thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it. So we have a great program today, don't we?
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's really something because, you know, culture is such a platitude, right? I mean, people talk about culture and they often have good intentions, but they don't really build it into their, compensation plan. You can't get fired for having a bad culture in most companies unless, you get sued, something really goes south. But, USESI takes it really seriously. We're going to talk to their CEO and president here in a few minutes. But first, we have to do a little business because this show is only made possible by our wonderful sponsors. So the first sponsor is Oracle NetSuite. For more than 20 years, Oracle NetSuite has helped organizations grow, scale, and adapt to unpredictable change with a unified true cloud platform. NetSuite especially enables fast-growing wholesale distribution companies to achieve operational excellence, manage margins and inventory, and support and expand their geographical footprint for years to come. NetSuite provides an integrated system that includes financials, ERP, HR management software, CRM, professional services automation, and omni-channel commerce. Most notably, though, is their demand planning and advanced inventory management, used by more than 28,000 customers in 215 countries and dependent territories. NetSuite has worked with HVAC, electronics, electrical, furniture, home goods, and industrial supply and equipment companies, just to name a few. NetSuite is a true cloud solution. Go to netsuite.com today to see why it's a great fit for your wholesale distribution company. Thank you, NetSuite. We appreciate your sponsorship. They're a sponsor for a lot of our content, and it makes a big difference. And Zoro, welcome to Zoro as a sponsor to the show, although I don't think this is their first time sponsoring the show.
This is first. It's the maiden voyage.
It is a first. So they've sponsored some other things, but first time for the Wholesale Change Show. So welcome to our new sponsor, Zoro, for the Wholesale Change Show. Zoro is an online B2B distributor offering millions and millions of products, an endless aisle where customers can find and buy more of what they need in one place. With fair pricing, quick delivery, and great customer service, Zoro exists to make customers' lives easier. What makes Zoro unique is that they build partnerships with distributor partners to provide products and fulfill orders. Zoro relies on its strong supplier partnerships to provide a great customer experience. In turn, Zoro makes it easy for those supplier partners to grow their business and expand their customer base online. Through world-class digital marketing, Zoro acquires thousands of customers online by showcasing the endless assortment of products from their suppliers. This means the revenue they generate from Zoro.com is a separate and incremental revenue stream, talking about for the distributor partners. Their supplier partners continue to invest and focus on their core business, and Zoro captures the fragmented small business market they have difficulty reaching. This helps suppliers scale effectively and profitably without huge resource investment. If you're interested in growing your sales and share online and you want a truly collaborative partnership, visit Zoro.com/sell-on-Zoro. That's sell on Zoro with dashes in between for more information. So thank you so much to our sponsors. Now, let's bring in our guests. Welcome to the show, please, everyone. Randy Eddy, he's the president and CEO of US Electrical Services. And Randy, we're really delighted and we appreciate that you've made time for us today. Thank you for joining the Wholesale Change Show.
Well, thanks for having me, Ian and Jonathan. I didn't know that I'm supposed to bring my special radio voice and all of that and be entertaining and I'll do my best anyway on the fly.
That's my job. That's my job, Randy. That's my job.
Right,
And
right.
so you can just be normal.
Okay.
That's a struggle for me.
You entertain and I'll just be normal. Okay.
Well,
Got
I
it.
think your content.
You'll be the straight guy in the thing, right?
Yeah, and we do encourage everyone to ask questions. We'll use all the questions that we can. But Randy, so for you podcast listeners, we're looking right now, and we don't depend on slides too much, but we do have Randy's background up. So, Randy, why don't you just quickly run us through your career here? You've only really had a few employers in a long career, so kudos to you for that. So, why don't you give us the thumbnail tour of your background?
Sure. I graduated from what was at the time USL, University of Southwestern Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns, in 1983, which was a deep recession. I thought it interesting after I graduated, they didn't think being University of Southwestern Louisiana, people would think of them seriously enough. So they changed their name to something that would be called Ooh La La. But anyway, I got a job with Summers Electric, which is now a part of Rexel. I took that job because they were the only ones that offered me a job. And so anyway, got out of school, went to work. I was sweeping the floor. I worked in the wire room for almost a year. I thought I wasn't in the program anymore at one point. I ended up leaving them and going to work for a small independent that CED purchased very quickly afterwards. In case you're wondering why I left them, I remember it's kind of a long story, but my boss, the branch manager, said it took me 20 years to learn how to be a branch manager or to become a branch manager, and there's no way you're going to do it in 2. I said, okay, well, that's a note.
Yeah, it wasn't a very meritocracy based point of view.
Right. So I didn't have 20 years to spend doing that. So I went to work for the small independent, and CED bought them. And very shortly after that, I was an outside salesperson at the time, and they made me a profit center manager in Lake Charles, Louisiana, where I spent 9 years, and I went in various increasing capacities after that. Most people probably know, I'm going to skip a step here, but US Electrical Services and CED have the same parent shareholders. The same people own the 2 companies. So, and another part, CED is generally, at least certainly at the time, was individual locations that functioned, is a beautiful thing, what I did in Lake Charles, Louisiana, or any number of other places. But since 1995, as you know, a lot of businesses had become very famous with the distribution center model and started becoming very successful since Walmart kicked that off. Our shareholders were very intelligent and realized that they needed to be playing in both different business models instead of changing one to the other. A gentleman named Richard Worthy had created US Electrical Services as a roll-up. In 2006, you'll remember back then, 2006, nothing could go wrong. Everything was going to go to the moon. Everybody was going to get rich. So he was going to buy 10 companies, roll them up, create $1 billion company, and sell it to HD Supply or Wesco or something like that. And everybody involved would get rich. That didn't work out. The company kind of fell apart in the middle of that, only about a year later, year and a half, something like that. And our shareholders came in and bought the company. Once Richard's contract was up, he asked me to go over there to flip to the other side, said, Randy, you know how this all works. You know how to be excellent in our profit center model. Go figure it out in the CDC model. And that's what he did. And I spent a couple of years transitioning, and starting in 2012, we basically, built the company from scratch, we bought one instance of Eclipse. We created one data warehouse, one product file, one of everything, not one of everything, but one of a lot of things, and started building from there. And we created all the different processes and all the things that would make it the best company of our type. And that was our charge, was to make it the best company of our type. So that gets us to
So what does US Electric look like today? Take us through coverage, brands that you have, brands that you carry. Talk to us about the business today.
Sure. We are most of the time we're a bunch of regions, and a region is between 80 and 600 million. Each region will usually have its own distribution center, though in some cases, in two cases, we'll have two regions functioning out of a common distribution center. That's not easy to pull off, by the way, when you start looking at names and pricing and all that. And so we have business, we cover the Northeast. I mean, we are like ants. Every 20 miles, there's one of us. And overall, it adds up to 6 distribution centers and about 145 locations. We are very strong in Massachusetts and Connecticut and New York City, Philly, Delaware, Western PA, DC. We go down into Virginia. We just started up there a few years ago. We're also in Atlanta. We skip North Carolina right now. And then we're very strong out in Southern California with Walters Wholesale. So up in the Northeast, two of us are EWs. We have Standard Electric, Monarch, Maurice, Lade. And we also have Wiedenbach Brown, who operates in the national accounts space. So a lot of our time and effort is spent on making the CDC model work.
Now go ahead, Jonathan.
Please go ahead.
Well, I think, so you really learn to thrive and lead in different types of business models for distributors, right? Mm-hmm. And you've advanced your career, you've reached the pinnacle. So before we move into the discussion about culture and loyalty, which is really the heart of the conversation, just a quick question for you, because there are people on this call and they want to know, how can they achieve your kind of success? Do you have, sort of leadership principles you follow personally, not so much for the organization, but to, advance your career while, you've only worked really for, it sounds like 2 companies, right? Because one was really under the same owners. And so you didn't job hop around to try to get to new levels. You succeeded, I guess you'd call it organically within the same company. What are the leadership practices you follow, Randy, that have led to your success?
Well, I think you can't do anything without an extraordinary level of integrity. I personally am very sensitive of how I perceive people with, from an integrity standpoint. If you tell me that something's light blue and 2 months ago you told me it was sky blue, I'm like, well, you must not be remembering what you were telling me. So I think you have to have just a unparalleled level of integrity, first off. In my job, I always just tried to do the level. I never worried about the next job. I never for one day thought about what's next for me. I just thought about how could I do my job the best I could possibly do it. Now, if somebody on this podcast is a 21-year-old looking to succeed in business, I would tell you it would be surprising to me that you would ever be waiting on us. We're always going to be waiting on you. I mean, the need is out there much greater than the talent to fulfill it. We just need people to get, to get good enough to fill all the positions. So there's a ton of opportunity out there as long as you can work for the right company. And I'm very fortunate to be working for, the best people you could be working for.
That's great. Great. Thank you. And Jonathan, you had a loyalty question, right?
Yeah. And so as we lead into the heart of the discussion here, there's a somewhat well-known book called The Loyalty Effect by Frederick, is it Reichheld? Is that how it's pronounced, Ian?
I think it's Reichheld.
Reichheld, okay. By Frederick Reichheld. And basically what Reichheld looks at is that customer loyalty gains you market share and lowers the costs of getting a new customer and then serving that customer. And as a result of that customer loyalty and lowering your costs, you can now pay workers more, which boosts morale and longevity. And then the really insightful piece that he's had is that as the employee experience rises, meaning as it gets better, however you're measuring that, and Randy's going to have a really good discussion here on that, that enhances customer service and retention even more, and so on. So you get this virtuous, figure eight thing where employee loyalty feeds customer loyalty feeds employee loyalty, and all of this makes you more profitable. So I think with that as a background, I'm curious, Randy, if you could start to describe what you've seen with your company in the relationship between results and employee satisfaction, and then we're going to peel back into the details of employee satisfaction.
Well, it's interesting you said that, Jonathan, because I saw a podcast a few months ago, and a guy was talking about maintaining perspective on what we're trying to do, and it reminds me of our time going through COVID. If you look at what we're trying to do as a business, it is to have a lot of loyal, quality customers. That's all we want to do. So everything should support that. When COVID came, everybody seemed to forget that. And it's like, my job is to protect the company and save money, which obviously that doesn't work well at all for having loyal, profitable customers. So was your question, why did we embark on the journey of focusing on culture?
Great question. Let's go with that.
Okay. Well, so there's about three reasons we got there. There's a couple of reasons we got into it. And then there's a couple of reasons we figured out later that were side benefits we didn't know about. The first thing was, if I'm charged with building the best company of my type, that's my goal. And I have a shareholder who's going to give me the resources I need to do it, and is going to leave me alone and let me get the job done. If that's my charge, and I'm going to build the best company of my type, am I going to do that by just squeezing as much profit to the bottom line as possible? No, that doesn't sound like, that doesn't, put that on an advertisement to try to recruit people, right? So, I've drawn, if you go to my office, there's triangles on the board, and there's a few different triangles. And one of them talks about, we want to have happy shareholders and happy customers and happy employees. And that's kind of what you're talking about with the loyalty effect. And the shareholder, that comes as a side effect of having happy customers and happy employees. So if I want to have, and if you look at our mission statement today, it is to be the best electrical solutions provider in our space by helping our customers meet and exceed their goals and creating a great place to work. You'll hear great place to work all over the place if you go run around USESI for a little while. So the first reason was we want to be, the best of our type. And to do that, we've got to know that we're a great place to work. If you want to know you're going to be a great place to work, you got to measure that. Nobody's saying we're a very profitable company. Don't worry about it. We don't keep up with the dollars and cents. Just trust me, we're making money. No, they measure that. They measure it down to the penny, and they're getting into GMROI and all that sort of thing. So if I want to be a great place to work, I should be doing an equal amount of measurement of how well I'm doing it at that. So that's kind of the first reason. The second one, which was, a strategy, I guess, when we started thinking in the early days, if we're going to have the best company, we've got to have the best team. And to have the best team, so we put together sort of a team strategy. And if you look at the team strategy, we're going to have a great training program. And we do. We have the best training program in the industry. Nobody can touch what we do as far as entry level employees or training for all our employees. Then we need to have a great recruiting program. And then we need to have, if you just kind of think about your magnetization, how much are people attracted to you compared to how much are you repelling them? And those that are attracted to you, are they calling their friends up and saying, hey, you want to get on this team? We want to be very attractive. So if you think about being a very attractive company to work for, well, you go down to the same place again. We want to be a great place to work. And then I'll repeat the same speech before, but I won't. So that's why we went down the path. Once we got down the path, we realized there were some other benefits we didn't necessarily think about. Once you measure, and I'll tell you in a little while how the whole thing works. Once you start measuring culture, you start getting, practical information on how to run the company. Very specific. If you survey a branch and 60% of the people use bullying as a current state way to describe the branch, well, then somebody needs to go to that branch today, right? Because we've got a major problem. But if you have another situation where you get information hoarding or any of the conflict avoidance or blame or long hours, then that tells you very specific things that you need to work on. Like we know in USESI, when we survey how people think we handle COVID, and we get a lot of good information. But when we did the CVA, since COVID, long hours started popping up as a limiting value that we needed to work on. So we all get together and we work on that. So we weren't really thinking about those kind of things. We just knew we wanted to have a great culture. But another thing, say again,
what was that term you used? CDVA?
CVA, Cultural Values Assessment.
Got it. Okay. So thanks. So keep going.
Once, the other thing is, once we got in, the first thing we had to do is we had to, we developed a mission, which I already told you. We decided on what our values are: employment fulfillment, excellence, integrity, shared vision. And then we have a number of sub items under there. Under integrity is, do the right thing regardless of the consequences. And that gives us guideposts on just how to run the company.
So so two questions come to mind. I'll start with the training one, but I want to ask more about the cultural values assessment. What makes your training the best in the industry? What do you train them on? And what does the structure of that training look like?
So if you think back in the beginning, we go and we buy, Eclipse, and we're like, okay, let's fire this thing up. Well, you don't just fire up Eclipse. You got to flip like 4,000 control switches. And if you flip one, you got to flip different ones, and it's very complicated. And if you use it wrong, it either works or it doesn't. If you do it right, it works fine. And because of our organization having branches, in some cases 2 regions into one CDC and part of a company, we're using hierarchies that have terms like, grandbaby in it, grandbaby, daughter, mother, and so it's a complicated structure. Well, once we got all that dialed in, then we wrote, I have a guy, he's the best ever. We hired him from Eclipse, and we wrote SOPs for every one of those processes. And then he put together a training video for every one of those SOPs. And that's procedurally how we do the training and how we train all our employees and that kind of thing. With the ALPS program, which is our leadership development, that's where we're hiring people usually out of college, but now we're focusing more on high school as well. He took all of that stuff along with all the industry training that we would do, whether it be products or how to be a counter person or whatever, and created I think the thing about that program is it's got a fantastic feedback mechanism where we're giving feedback to the employee and the employee is giving feedback to us, the trainee, every 2 months. And so and if you take the the management training program, which is kind of like the 2-year deal, we break that up into pieces. And so part of that is how to be a great counterperson. And then we can use that for individual employees. For any employee, we can just hire someone off the street, make them a great warehouse person, and take a great warehouse person and make them a great counterperson, and so on.
So you're training on job roles, you're training on how to be a leader. Do you train on products as well?
Oh, yeah. And leadership. But to give you an idea, I mean, of the kind of company, the kind of committed people we have, my training director, Steve, I'm talking to these employees, and they were talking about the new leadership development program that they went through. And it's like, I think it's 11 weeks, an hour a week, and you have homework and all that kind of thing. And they're telling me about how it's absolutely life-changing. And I'm like, well, that is the best thing ever. I mean, I am thrilled that we have an 11-week life-changing leadership development program. Well,
it could be a new profit
not
center,
only
it could be a new profit center, by the way.
I've already thought about that. Well, not only did I not tell Steve to do it, I didn't know he was doing it. I mean, I found out that the training program came about by people who had graduated from it 11 weeks later and told me that their life had changed.
Okay.
So just a little bragging about my guy because he's great.
That's great. That's great. And let's get into how you manage the CVA, the cultural values assessment.
Yes.
How, you know, what
because I think what's interesting, I think what's interesting here is you have a thing that's inherently soft and you're measuring it, right? Cultures is inherently a soft and squishy thing. Yet you're bringing measurement to it.
Sorry, Jonathan. Also, I think it's interesting that your guy felt empowered to go ahead and do that training, enroll people in it, and do something life-changing, and didn't have to run it up the ladder and get it approved to make that happen. That's a statement about the culture itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that we've got some highly committed, there's a lot of people that have the shared vision of we're going to create the best company of our type. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll talk about the CVA, and then we can kind of maybe fill in the pieces. So we hired a consultant. We hired a lady named Ruth Lunn, and she has Jen Bell and Laurel McDermott with Legacy Center. And we started with them, I think it was in 2017, 5 years ago. And we started out, and first we had to get a bunch of people together and decide what's the mission of the company, what are our values, what are we going to try to be, what are going to be those guideposts that are going to determine how we're going to run the company. Once a year, we do there's a company called Barrett, the Barrett model, and we use we do the cultural values assessment. It's a big deal. We want to get 100% participation. We don't get 100%, because there's always somebody that thinks we're going to use it to fire them. But I mean, our participation is high and has gotten higher and higher. I think it's above 90% now. In the beginning, it was lower. Right. And so what we do is we give them 100 words. I think it's 100, maybe it's 90 or something like that, but it's a bunch of words. And they have words like power, conflict avoidance, blame, information hoarding, teamwork, accountability, good words and bad words, family, all these kinds of words. And we ask these employees to describe competitiveness, there's another one, to describe their personal values, then the current state of the business as they see it, and then the desired state of the business. Okay, so once you do that, you can do all kinds of data mining. The first thing you want to mine is what was your participation? Then we're going to look at what were the limiting values. Like the first 7 words that I listed were the limiting of values. So conflict avoidance, long hours, profit's one of them. We always argue that one, but the argument is, if profit is, the top 10 out of 100 words that an employee, that a counterman uses to describe the company, then, we're probably not doing it exactly right. but blame, information hoarding, bullying that I mentioned earlier, long hours, all those things. So that's the first thing we do with the CVA score is what percentage of the answers in each business unit, branch, region, CDC, headquarters, et cetera, are limiting values. And that gives us something to work on. Okay, so when we got into COVID and we handled it the way we handled it, and we did ask the employees what percentage think, do you think we handled COVID well? In 2020, 77% said yes. In 21, 96% said yes. So I think we handled COVID pretty well. But long hours came up. We're at about 150 out of 2,000 employees said long hours was a current state. So that gives us something to work on. What's happening that's causing that? So we measure the limiting values, and then we also measure what's the correlation between the current state and the desired state. Now, the first time we did this, I want to say we had 3 or 4 values that were top 10 in the current state and in the desired state. This last time we had 8 out of 10 were current state versus desired state. So we come up with 2 scores. One, you want to be low. That's the percentage of limiting values. And there we went from, I think, 18 to 12 currently, which is considered excellent and healthy. And then our culture score went from 44 to 82. So also excellent.
So that means you're paying attention to the data and acting on it because you're getting better.
Oh, sure. So in the very beginning, if you can imagine, I hope I painted a picture that we had a hot mess and we're trying to piece this company together, and so, we had the mess, and we're putting, and you've got this complicated structure. So bureaucracy showed up a lot as a current state. But then I noticed, we have a lot of bureaucracy in the whole company. But in this region over here, there's only 2% bureaucracy. And this one over here, there's 25% bureaucracy. So why is there so much, if bureaucracy is a company thing, why is there so much in one region than another? And that gives you information to act on. You can say, well, maybe there's a training program or they have a process problem where these employees are going through 5 steps to get something done when they should just go to the final person. And you might have, like I mentioned, long hours. You can imagine what that's like. If you get certain things like, if you get a high enough entropy and too many of the bad things, bullying would be terrible, then, that might be for the leader of that business, that could be mean career redirection for them. And that's a known fact. So people know that nobody's going to have a bad culture score twice. And it can be bad enough that it'll only happen once.
Say more about that, because when we were preparing for the show, you shared some really pointed rather than poignant examples of that. Nobody does it twice.
Yeah, one thing I think that's interesting about the culture score, it's significant for our region presidents. There is a positive impact on their annual bonus if they do well or improve with their culture efforts. And so they have the carrot aspect of it. But just imagine you could have a business leader that's just printing money. And we've never done a culture survey of that person. I know businesses like this today that are running right and left. And then they're losing people every now and then. It's always for a great reason. The competition gave them gave them a big raise. There's always some excuse. But then when you look back, it's happening all the time, right? Mm-hmm. You go to that leader. I've had this happen in the past. I go to that leader and I'm like, hey, Jonathan, you're losing the audience, man. The train has left the station and you're not on it. You got to do something to get the team back on board. I mean, you just lost an employee this week. You lost one last month. And it's an argument. I mean, I've had times it's taken me a year and a half to get the point across to that leader that they've got a problem. When they get a CVA score and it needs to be, 12 or below and it's 35, there's no discussion. It's like, pal, you got a problem. And he's like, oh, I know. And he's digging into the data or she digging into the data and figuring out what the problem is. But it certainly can be bad enough that I'll go in. I've had 3 cases where I've had to go in and make a change because there was no way that leader was going to turn it around. So I've had 2 region presidents and a CDC VP that we've had to make a change.
And I think also what you'd mentioned was that, in a sense, you have a higher tolerance for performance issues than for cultural issues. Is that correct? And if so, can you comment on that?
Well, I would say, no, I think if you look at, are you saying financial performance?
Financial classic performance as opposed to cultural, right?
Right. So if you look at financial performance, I think everybody has the same scale of, we need 90 to 100. I would say some people don't have a scale on culture. We have the same scale of 90 to 100 on both. Now, if you have a terrible year and you're down 25%, you can argue that. I can argue the market, all kinds of dynamics cause me to do poorly. There's no argument for a bad culture.
Right. Because
it's the leader.
Yeah, it's within, it's much more within your control sometimes than the financial outcomes. But we do have a question here. So this is related. I think it's a logical extension of the discussion. How do these cultural values correlate to financial results? And I would add, over a period of time.
Well, and one thing, okay. Do you have the graph I sent you?
Yes, I can find it. So you go ahead and keep talking and I will find that graph.
Well, when Ian finds the graph and shares it, if you went back to 2017, as our culture has improved, our operating income as a percent of sales has improved basically the same relative amount. So basically culture got better faster. In the beginning, we weren't able to move the needle very fast on culture because we didn't know what we were doing. It's a learning experience. It takes you a couple of years. In the beginning, you think it's about whether your employees are happy or angry, but I don't think happy and angry are one of the words they let you pick. And you would have leaders that would, not think it's real. And they would say, well, that employee was, pissed off that month. And so he answered, all bad words on, well, you don't sit there and root out a word like information hoarding because you're angry. That means someone is probably hoarding information.
Yeah.
So
right.
The correlation
I think the only one.
This. Go ahead.
The only one I can find, Randy.
That's
there
it.
It is. Okay. There you go. Right.
So you
okay.
can
So
see
so let me just explain what we're looking at, Randy, to the podcast listeners. So there's 2 lines on this page.
Right.
There's an orange line which shows the CVA score over time from 2017 to 2021. There's a blue line that shows the median operating income over the same time period, and basically they're very closely correlated. So go ahead.
Right. The orange line, which is a CVA score, we went from a 42 to a 44 to an 82. The operating income, I don't want to tell you the numbers on that because you don't want to know them, but it's improved about the same. Right. And the CVA went up, the culture score went up faster, and then the operating income caught up with it. And except for one blip, this blip that I referred to in 2019, where it looks like we went down in operating income. That was just because we found an accounting problem that we overstated our earnings in 2018 because it was kind of ugly back then. But we've improved always on both fronts.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
with the culture, we still have work to do. We have plenty of work left to do, but we're running out of work to do. We don't have as much as we had before.
Yeah, and I think it's not.
Go ahead, Ian.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's natural for the financial earnings to lag the CVA by a little bit because they're driven by the CVA, and you've got this healthy circle that Jonathan talked about where you have a great culture, and then that has an impact on on customer sales, customer performance, and so it's a reinforcing loop. But you need to improve the culture first because that drives the performance. So the performance is going to lag it by just a little bit.
That's true, and I think if you do better culturally, your employees are going to find it out faster,
right,
than your customers. That takes a lot more time. But it's something else that I didn't mention. So if you just imagine, we have this list in every branch, every business unit in the company. So whatever that is, 160 business units altogether, if you count all the different things, we can measure how many people describe it as a current state compared to the desired state. So if a third of your employees have accountability as a current state and 3/4 of them have it as a desired state, you've got a work to do on accountability. And in the early days, we got a lot of, we would get accountability, we would get communication, information hoarding was a problem. And, you added it all up. And what it said is the employees in the branch want to do well. And if they do well, they want to be treated like they're doing well. And they want to know what doing well is. So we created the branch comp plan where all the employees in the branch share in the profits that they make in their branch. The manager meets with the employees, every month, talks about here's the scorecard, here's how we're doing, here's what we have to do better. And then they quarterly, give them the money. And so we did that to, we had the senior leadership talking about what can we do to, to knock out all these problems that we're having with. And so today you don't have, accountability is always going to be on the list, but it's not as high as it was before. Now, the long hours that I mentioned before is the other one.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you talked about earlier is that, I mean, really in your organization, having the cultural performance is just as important as the financial outcome. And you can, if you're a leader and you can't make the culture right, you can lose your job. And many organizations, as long as you're making your numbers, you get a lot of forgiveness on the cultural side. And your organization, they're equally important and you're held equally accountable for both. And that is not what I normally see in companies.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. I made a note here some stuff, we've kind of learned over time is, I mentioned the practical benefits of making culture a metric, but, we've learned over time with, what's death to a culture. If you don't have integrity or you let that be anywhere in the company, it's over. If you are a political organization, or don't have a meritocracy where there's a difference between who's working hard and who's winning, it's over. I mean, you can't even get started once you do that. And then prioritizing profits over everything else. I had a leader back in the day, and you call him up and you say, I just found out this guy working for me, I believe, is harassing his female employees. And his question would be, well, is he a good guy? How does that affect how we're going to deal with this? I mean, right. If he's doing the wrong thing, we're going to do something about it. So if you don't have those things, and we had a situation in a branch right after we got into all our, what our values were going to be. And I had a leader telling me, basically, we just found out our best employee was stealing from us. And unfortunately, he was stealing from us for almost good reasons, because he had gotten some debt and he needed the money desperately. And so I'm finding myself saying, well, if we're going to do the right thing, regardless of the consequences, then we're going to do the right thing.
Right.
So you have to have those. If you don't have those situations built into the company, it's very difficult to start improving on the culture.
Yeah. So what does this do for you in terms of employee retention?
I was going to look that up earlier this morning because I knew you were going to ask that question. You have to break employee retention down into CDCs, non-CDCs, and then within both of those, less than 1 year employees and more than 1 year employees.
Yeah, I agree. Right. Yes. Right.
If I look at over 1 year employees, we have, I mean, so if you're talking about like, so region employees, so outside the CDC, I can tell you this, I know all the people we lost that had been with us more than a year. I mean, and it was, you know, you hear about these 40% looking for another job and all that. In our biggest region, we had a competitor target us really hard, trying to get all our people. They hired 3, we hired 2 of them back, and we didn't want the third one. Another region hasn't lost an employee, and they've hired 8 from the competition. Another region lost 3. I mean, so it's down to, and the retention is very good with longer term employees. We don't have 5-year employees going to, if someone's going to work somewhere else, then we've got a problem in that particular business.
You know, so here's a theory I have, Randy. The retention and the reason that employees stick around like that, it's twofold. One is the culture really is getting better, right? That's obvious. So the culture gets better. You're addressing the problems. It continues to be a better place to work, and they therefore like working there more. The second one, though, which is related, is they feel like they have an impact and some control over the culture, that they can influence it because you're listening to them. So like with the longer hours thing, even if you can't ameliorate that in the next few months, and it takes a while for you to get to it, you get some credit, as you should, because you're responding to it and you're trying. It's not unlike a service recovery process with a customer where, you know, if you mess up, but then you make an earnest attempt to fix it, they're much more forgiving than if they feel like you're not listening to them. Does that make sense as you know, part of the reason that employees are satisfied? And I'm not saying you don't have to make the real improvements over time. I'm saying the fact that you're trying makes a difference to employees as well.
Yeah, I would say 2 things there, Ian. First of all, yeah, absolutely. We have a whole process we go through. So we get the results back. We look at all the data. There's all kinds of analysis that you can look at the data. And then we'll sit down in each region, at the company level and at the branch level, and we'll say, okay, here are the outcomes and here's what we need to do. And I'm a lot more pragmatic about it. You know, if you say long hours, okay, let's go find who's working more than 40 hours and fix that. And it was very specific situations. It would be, you know, this guy in this branch used to work from 8 to 5, and we started asking him to come in 2 hours early to check the transfers in, and forgot to let him get off 2 hours early. Okay, well, let's let him get off 2 hours early. There goes that one. And so we go through and we'll tell all the employees, here's what we heard from you, here's what you said, and here's what we're doing about it. Now, in the early days, we didn't do it well. All these regions are pretty region centric. So if you heard lack of communication, the regions, the typical thing is they would create a newsletter, right? And we're going to communicate, we're going to have and newsletters are fine. But, you know, what I believe is an employee's culture is that of the business he's in or she's in. So if it's an 8-person branch, the person running that branch is that employee's culture. It's not Randy Eddy. You know, I'd like to think it is. So we tend to be eccentric about thinking about how we control their culture, but we have to look at who really controls the culture. So it's been a muscle we've had to develop over the years. But yeah, the employees all definitely know. Now, if we have a situation where the employees believe they said, here's what needs to be fixed, and nothing happened, well, that would be the case of 2 of the leaders that aren't with us anymore. Because I'm in big trouble if I start thinking the employees are reaching out, they're saying, here's a problem, and leadership is not listening to us and isn't fixing the problem. Now, at that point, that leader's lost the audience.
And that's the other side of that coin, is if you ask the question and you're not prepared to act on the answers, then you shouldn't have asked.
Yes. Yeah. Don't do the survey if you don't want the answers. Yep.
Right.
Well, and if you go back to the longer hours thing, if you have done things that have demonstrated your ability to listen and then change accordingly, they may give you more credit for the time you need to fix that longer hours problem. Like the longer hours problem might be a function of something that was going on in COVID, right? I've seen that in some distribution.
Oh, it absolutely was. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. So they might have more forbearance for you to fix that problem if they've seen you fix other problems.
That's true. And I would tell you, I mean, the whole thing about what you do about getting the survey and then reacting to it and all of that, it's not, I mean, it took us a little while to get going with it, and, relying on Legacy Center and Ruth, Lund, and Jen and Laurel, they spent a lot of time helping us figure these things out. And, okay, here's what we heard. Now, how do we really make a difference with that? You don't just go fix, bureaucracy. And if I look, I would tell you, if I look at the company today, we do our annual business reviews. And if you can just imagine what you classically think of an average of a business review, and you're talking about inventory management and pricing and all of that. If you go into one of our business reviews, probably a third of the discussion is culture based.
Wow.
It's we heard, and I heard in this branch, I'm not doing a good enough job of telling employees where they stand, holding them accountability, so on and so forth.
So Randy, you get USESI gets very good Glassdoor ratings, superb, right? So that's the measurement from the outside that what you're telling us on the inside is true. When it comes to compensation, I've often found you pay a nickel more, you get a dime or a quarter back. I'm curious where you guys come out on compensation. High, low, medium, high, low, average. Where do you think you come out as a company on compensation?
I would tell you we are, well, we're on base pay, we are probably average.
Okay.
Our bonus structure, we share a lot of the profits with the employees.
So total comp is higher than is what you think?
Oh yeah.
Okay, good.
But we started the bonus plan years ago, and it was like, okay, let's say just pick a number. We're making $1,000 a year, and we're like, well, $1,000 is good. I'd hate to lose my 1,000. And then I model out the bonus plan. Well, you can't model the bonus plan and say, well, everybody gets a pay cut, or you're going to get a bonus. You have to leave everybody's pay the same, right? So we said, okay, well, this is gonna take $400 of my 1,000 and give it to all the employees. I hope that works. But the next year, I'm going to say we made 1,600, and so we got our money back from the bonus, and it has absolutely driven better performance in the branches.
Nice. Terrific. Randy, I feel like we could discuss this forever. I mean, the topic is so rich, and your honest telling of your growth through this process has just been amazing, and I think a huge benefit to our wholesale change audience. So thank you very, very much for a fantastic and in-depth discussion.
Happy to do it. Hopefully I can help somebody, do something better.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking is you're in an environment where it's okay to talk about the things that you're not succeeding at, where you need, the places where you need to improve. So many times these performance discussions are about, I'm not going to admit any faults. I'm going to talk about all the wonderful things that I've done. But when you have this process where you're surveying on culture all the time, then you have to talk about the things that aren't going well, because you know what they are, first of all. And you're making a third of your business review discussion about that. So you're making it okay to talk about where a manager needs to improve. And that's not always the case with these performance discussions.
Well, I think you're right. We have to, because the employees know.
Yes, they do. Right. Whether
So
or not you
even
know.
if we don't ask them, they know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So we got to do something about it.
Well, Randy, thank you so much for being on the show today. We do have a couple more events coming up. On April 20th, we're doing State of Distributor Customer Experience, what customers want. This is a survey-based report on what are the needs of distribution customers. That's led by Dean Mueller and, of course, Jonathan Byen. And then on April 27th, we have our next guest, Dr. Al Bates. The topic is, can distributors get out of the profit rut? So the 20th program was brought to you by Epicor and Approve, and the 27th is brought by Oracle. Today's program was brought to you by NetSuite, Oracle, and Zoro. So thanks again to those two organizations. Randy's email address is Reddy, R-E-D-D-Y. That's Reddy, R-E-D-D-Y at USESI.com. If you have questions about maybe the consultant that they've used or the process that they've gone through, Randy be happy to answer your questions. You can reach Jonathan or me by going to distributionstrategy.com. Thanks to everyone for joining us today, but especially, again, Randy, thanks to you. It's been great talking to you.
All right. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thanks. You bet. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Wholesale Chain Show. Bye now.